Good evening, viewers. It's George from Ireland here. I'm going to talk to you today about effective public speaking. I've got 10 tips on this. They're quite lengthy, each of them. I've spoken a lot in public, particularly when I was at Oxford, speaking at the Oxford Union, which is a debating society, and I debated for Oxford. Let me see, I've spoken to up to 1,000 people there. Anyway, so here are my tips. In, I think, a logical order. Having said that, not all of them will apply in all situations. Imagine you have to speak to a group of people. It could be 10 people, could be thousands of people. If possible, visit the venue in advance. Probably not the day you're going to speak, sometime before. So then you'll feel a lot more comfortable. Forewarned is forearmed. You're not going to be thrown by arriving in a strange place. You can test out the acoustics a little bit, just begin to feel at home there. Perhaps have someone stand at the back of the room and you speak, and can they hear you or not? Now, admittedly, on the day, the room will be full of people and chairs, so the acoustics will be a little bit different. Check the sound system, is it actually working? And of course, the day you're actually going to speak, arrive in very good time. You could possibly try the same on the day you're going to speak. But the other thing is, you won't be stressing, am I going to make it? You don't want to arrive a bundle of nerves because you're sweating as to whether you're going to be tardy or not. Anyway, number 2, so mindset. You can speak to one person, so you can speak to 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 or 300 or 1,000 or 1,000,000. So it's really just incremental. And if you have the option, you would build up the number of people you speak to, rather than going straight from only having spoken to one person at a time to speaking to an audience of millions. I know that's a little far-fetched for people watching this video, but tell yourself that in a way it's no different from speaking to just one person at a time. I know it's different really, because a crowd reacts differently and emotions tend to be magnified. The atmosphere can be electric, and not everyone would want to hear what you want to say. On the other hand, if you say something popular or crack a good joke, you can get a tremendously positive reception. But tell yourself, if you're anxious, that essentially it's no different than speaking to just one person. You've got to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, how can you ask anybody else to believe in yourself? Now, you might have doubts. You're probably wise to have doubts. Only an egomaniac wouldn't. But suppress those. It just shows that you're saying that you have some doubts in yourself. You have a bit of self-awareness and you question your own ability. And you just think people have delivered far more unpopular messages than you've had to deliver. People have been booed off stage and spat at. That's not going to happen to you. You'll do well. Tell yourself it'll be just fine. Like an exam or something, don't worry about it. Then it'll go well. You might have heard of the film The King's Speech. George VI suffered from a terrible speech impediment. He was a stammerer, he couldn't pronounce certain sounds like S, and he had greatness thrust upon him. He was made to be king when his brother abdicated, and he had to give perhaps the most crucial speech of all time, declaring the Second World War. And of course he felt terribly embarrassed about his stammer and mispronunciation, and he had special help from a speech coach. And right before George VI is going to speak live on air to hundreds of millions of people, his speech coach says, remember, say it to me as a friend. And if you can think of it like that, it'll make the whole thing an awful lot easier. It'll lift the burden from your shoulders. Prepare, as in all things, preparation is crucial, all right? We all know practice makes perfect. You might have about 4 major ideas for your speech, and then you flesh all of those out with several sub-ideas for each one of them. If you're going to deliver factual information, double check it, make sure it's accurate. Are there any words you're not quite clear how to pronounce? Well, make sure you practice those, get guidance, what is the correct pronunciation. There might be more than one correct pronunciation of a certain word. I'm trying to think of a word like, okay, encephalitis or encephalitis. Choose whichever one you like, and then you might say to the audience, and I know some people pronounce it the other way. You should have an apposite vocabulary for the people you're speaking to. You can't just speak in public, you have to speak to a particular audience. Are these people 5-year-olds? Are they geriatrics? Are they professors of dentistry? Are they soldiers? Is English their first language or not? You have to take all this into account in choosing an appropriate vocabulary and adjust it accordingly. Do not use abbreviations unless everyone is going to understand. NHS, in the United Kingdom, everyone knows what NHS. Outside, they don't know what NHS, National Health Service. If you use abbreviations that most people will know, you might then want to just spell it out to make sure that absolutely everybody gets that. Don't use slang if people are not native speakers of English when they're unlikely to understand. Words like okay you could use, but certain words they wouldn't have learnt at school, you've got to take that into account. Appearance. So make sure your clothes are perfect. Overdress rather than underdress. Err on the side of formality. Your hair or whatever. If you're a woman wearing makeup, maybe nothing too dramatic, so that you feel absolutely self-assured and you're not given anything to criticize, anything to distract from the content of what you're saying. Have a non-controversial appearance. You'll feel a lot better. The audience will warm to you. They're not just hearing you. Some of what they take in, some of what they judge is visual. Your shoes are spit polished, and so on. Eye contact. So it's good to make eye contact with your audience. Now, if you're feeling timid, you might not want to do it. The trick is, I can see my own image here, I'm making eye contact, or so it might appear. What I'm actually doing is I'm looking at my forehead. If you find it a bit embarrassing to make eye contact, look just above, look here, and the people, as I'm doing now, might not be able to tell you're actually looking at their foreheads or their eyebrows rather than their eyes. But don't just be looking down at your speech. Don't talk to your toes. Be looking up. If you have to consult your speech, try and glance up every so often. And don't read out loud. Don't read every word. You'd have bullet points, brief notes, which you then turn into full sentences. Expand it. Notes are just to jog your memory, just to channel your nerves into something you can actually squeeze, not that this is a piece of paper, and put your anxiety into the paper and not into your voice. You have written notes in case your mind goes blank. It'll give you a lot more confidence to know you can refer to that if you forget things. When you get up to speak, step up to the podium, wait for quiet if they're applauding or something. Don't talk over them. You pause, breathe, and then start. Okay, so you make sure you have their attention before you launch into it. If you feel unsure of yourself, you could admit that, saying, everyone, I'm feeling a bit nervous, so please go easy on me, or I haven't spoken to such a big audience before, and you'll immediately have them on side. You've gained their sympathy. Some self-deprecating humour could go down well, and it should just be an extension of your real personality. If you're a humorous person, you can make a mirthful remark. If you're a very serious-minded person, you could go with that. So you're not trying to adopt a totally bogus persona. People would see through that. The only thing you might be a bit dishonest about is pretending to be more self-assured than you really are. So speak slowly. You've probably rehearsed your speech many times, well, you should have done. They've never heard it before, so they need time to absorb it. Pause at punctuation if you have it, or whatever you judge to be natural punctuation. Pause. Allow them time to think about your words. They need to absorb what you're saying. Let it sink in with pauses. One of the reasons Obama's such an effective orator is he speaks fairly slowly and he allows people time to digest what he's just said. Right, another observation, variety. If someone's speaking in a monotone, that's incredibly bland to hear and your audience will just stop listening eventually. You vary the speed, the tone, the volume. Sometimes if you're quieter, they might actually strain to hear. And then you can get a bit louder, which wakes them up. So every minute or so, you should be changing that. You might even mark in your notes emotions you're going to project, like anger, sadness, sympathy, optimism, seriousness, or whatever it is, and have facial expressions to accompany that. A bit of gesticulation. You might overstate it somewhat because you're speaking to a large audience. However, you don't want to be ridiculous like a conductor or melodramatic. Likewise, facial expressions. They often say, imagine someone's half deaf, half blind at the back of the room. Even he or she has to hear and see it. So enjoy it or pretend to. If you can fool them into enjoying it, maybe you will enjoy it. Be confident, but if you're not, trick yourself into being confident. Tell yourself you do great. Get some reliable friends to give you a fillip to your self-belief beforehand. So you'll bolster your confidence by ample preparation and just knowing it backwards. Then you'll really believe you'll do it great. Ideally not sound wooden and over-rehearsed. Hillary Clinton sometimes does. You might slightly smile, maybe not smiling like a Cheshire cat. That can seem maniacal. Do not fill time. You're there to deliver a message, not to just use up time. If you're allotted half an hour and you can finish it adequately in 25 minutes, all right, sit down after 25 minutes. If you're allotted half an hour and you're not quite finished, you could overrun for a couple of minutes. Overrunning ridiculously will be resented. Let me see. Have a strong finale if you can. Repeat the key points. What's the single most important thing you want people to take away with? Maybe get them to tell it to you. And so, what did I say was the answer to this? Or what does that abbreviation stand for? Or what's the most important thing to learn today? Or something like that. Maybe some concept checking questions. Is this medicine suitable for diabetics? Is that yes or no? And the audience should be able to answer you based on what you said. I could speak for hours, but got to keep it reasonably brief, like a good public speech.